My name is Marcia Anglerell, and I'm the Cultural Affairs Officer Unit. I lead the cultural programs in Venezuela for the U.S. government, although we are based in Bogota. Today, I'm delighted to be the moderator of the first edition of a program in which we'll be discussing important female American leaders. We've decided to do this program in English so that our viewers can practice their English skills. Each half-hour session will work like this. We'll show a short documentary of our female leader that we are profiling, which today is Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. Then we will speak with the director of that documentary, who today is Diane Tsai of Time magazine. We'll ask her some questions, which we will select from the ones that you pose to us through the chat, or any you may have sent in advance. And you may pose your questions in English or in Espanol, and we will translate those in Spanish for Diane. So let's first say hello to Diane. Hi, Diane. Welcome, and thanks for accepting our invitation to be part of this Time First special series.
Thanks so much for having me. Really happy to be here.
Well, we're very happy that you are here. Let me just put into context a little bit about the female that we are profiling today before we watch the film. Many of you may already be very familiar with Nancy Pelosi, as she is an important political leader in the United States, leading the U.S. House of Representatives since January 2019, although this is the second time she has held that position. She's also the only woman to have ever had this role in the United States. And as Speaker of the House, she is the second in the line of succession to the U.S. president after Vice President Kamala Harris, which means that she's the third most important politician in the United States. So let's now watch what you came here to see, the Time First video of U.S. Speaker Nancy Pelosi. All right, I hope you found that as inspiring as I did. So let's welcome back Diane. Welcome again, Diane. I understand that you studied at the Medical School of Northwestern University and are now working for Time magazine. Could you let us know how you came to be involved in this fascinating series that highlights American female leaders in different fields?
Sure, yeah. I wanted to share a little bit of my background and how that kind of played into my experience. I'm Taiwanese American. I'm very proud to be Taiwanese American. And even though I was born in the US, I spent part of my childhood in Taiwan growing up. And so when we moved to the US, I definitely lived through the immigrant experience of learning English, trying to fit in, and struggling to figure out my sense of identity. And I think that really played a role in my interest in journalism and just talking to a lot of people and hearing different perspectives. And I found that through journalism, I was able to meet people that I would have never met otherwise and get a glimpse into their lives, into their perspectives, and how they see the world. So when I went to college, I went to Northwestern and I studied journalism, and that was where I started to work with video as a medium and to create short documentaries. And I've always been a visual person, and so that really became a creative outlet for me. And I also saw the impact that videos and documentaries and film could make with storytelling. It really deepens a viewer's sense of empathy when you can watch someone talk about their experience in a way that's very different from reading a quote or even just hearing it, but getting to connect with them visually, and then to see their environment and their circumstances, to feel like you're experiencing that firsthand and being there with them. So that's how I got my start as a journalist and as a filmmaker. And I joined Time with their video department, and that was how I got involved with FIRST. It was a huge team effort that came out of Time Magazine with collaboration from the photo department, the writers and editors, and then of course our video team. So I can talk a little bit about first as the project. It was inspired in 2016 when Hillary Clinton became the first woman from a major political party to receive the presidential nomination. And in that moment, we wanted to create something that would really celebrate this historic moment. And I remember for me personally covering that moment, I had a lot of mixed feelings going into it, because on one hand, you know, I was so happy that the glass ceiling had been shattered, and I was ecstatic, but there was part of me that couldn't believe that it was something I was witnessing in my adult life. And I just didn't understand, why didn't this happen sooner? And, you know, I've been feeling a lot like that recently too. And then, you know, when Hillary lost the election, that was when we really realized the importance of a project like this, because people were disappointed and they were even more eager for stories of empowered women who had accomplished great things. And we just wanted to remind people that there has been really amazing progress that has been made. And so, you know, let's take a moment to really take a look back at that and celebrate that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, yeah, no, thank you. I couldn't agree more with everything that you're saying. But no, I just also wanted to thank you for sharing, you know, part of your history with us, because I think it's so important for our audience to know, you know, the richness of the diversity that we have, you know, in the United States, and what brought you, you know, to Time Magazine and to this project. I was curious though to know, you know, because particularly hearing you talk about Hillary and her candidacy, but what did it mean to you to have filmed, you know, Nancy Pelosi as in her role in U.S. politics, and what did you learn from getting close to her?
Yeah. It was a really memorable moment for me. And it's something I experienced throughout this project. We interviewed more than 40 women, and to be able to meet them face to face and ask them the questions that I had and feel like they were telling me their advice for women, for them to speak that directly to me, was, yeah, just a really memorable experience. And one thing that we really wanted to do with this video and also the other films in this series was to give women and girls a collection of stories where they could see themselves reflected. And so, you know, for me as an Asian American woman, it meant a lot to me to see, you know, the Asian American women, people who were immigrants, but also to see the wide range of the industries and roles that they played. And for me, growing up, going into politics never crossed my mind. And I think it was partly a lack of exposure where I didn't see that many role models, and I didn't know that it was possible because it wasn't put in front of me. And so meeting Nancy Pelosi in person, it really made me realize the impact of seeing women like her, and being reminded of what the possibilities are, especially for a younger version of me. So I was so excited to experience that for myself and then be able to share that with others, knowing that they could watch this video and feel inspired by her in the same way. Yeah.
No, all of the things that you say, I think really resonate. Well, not only with me, but I think, you know, any female, you know, young girls that are watching right now, and particularly you mentioned the age that you're her young, you know, being a young person hearing her story, but obviously she entered, you know, politics, you know, later in life, and what an inspiration that can be to any woman, you know, thinking about starting a career, you know, after kids are grown and such. But I didn't want me to cut you off, but we do have some questions that were already submitted to us ahead of time. So I thought we could start with one of those first, and welcome to hear more of what you have to say about how you felt about this project, or Nancy Pelosi herself. But let's take one of the questions. And first of all, send our greetings to the National Film School in Caracas that submitted this question. So they ask for you, Diane, how did you organize for such a complex project as a Time First series? Did you learn something about female leadership while conducting the project?
Oh my gosh, I learned so much. Maybe I'll start with the first part of the question, how we organized it. It was really a team effort. So we started with the most well-known women, Hillary, Oprah, Serena Williams, all the people who come to mind. And then we expanded out to make sure we really represented the diversity of the US in terms of race, industry, age, all of that. And so we would constantly have running lists, and we had input from our editorial team. Everybody would talk about the decisions, the editors would approve it. And then part of that was also that these women had to agree to be part of it, because we were asking for their time to sit down and talk with us and to do the video interview. So that was kind of how the list came together. And then in terms of filming and producing and directing it, we had a very small crew. So the video crew was just 2 people, me and a colleague, Spencer. And sometimes we would have help, but more often than not, it was just the 2 of us and the photographer, Louisa Dorr, who photographed all the Time covers. It was the 3 of us traveling around the country, meeting these women. And yeah, I mean, we learned a wealth of advice. If you have time, the videos are on time.com/firsts. And we did this thing where we compiled some of their advice on different topics into specific videos. So there's one on marriage and family, there's one on work, there's one on their childhood, and I can just quickly list some of my favorite pieces of advice. One was from Madeleine Albright, where she said, if you are going to a meeting, be prepared to speak, because if you don't say anything, you give the impression that that you're not prepared or that you shouldn't be there. So always be prepared to speak. Another great piece of advice was, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for advice. Sometimes other people have solutions that you just have never thought of. So, and often they're very smart solutions too. Yeah.
That's all such great advice. And yeah, and I love that resource that you shared of going to time.com/first, because I'm sure there'll be interest, including myself, to go in and see what other advice can I learn from these great women. We have we have a question that's come in through our chat, so let's check it out. From Sevan from Merida asks, which of the women interviewed impressed you the most? That's a tough one.
Oh, that is a very tough one. I will say, yeah, it is impossible to choose favorites, but one person who really stands out is Oprah, because she's somebody that we all know so much about, and people say don't meet somebody you're a fan of because you're typically let down, but she just really, she's Oprah, and you go in and you have very high expectations, and she was just exactly what we expected. She left a very strong impression and had great advice.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you. She's definitely very, very popular. Let's go back to one of the other questions that we got from the National Film School in Caracas. Andrea Rodriguez asks, what message would you give to women that are starting the audiovisual world?
I would want you to know that, I mentioned we had a small team, but also that this project resulted in 12 magazine covers that were all taken on an iPhone. And it's because we had an incredible photographer. And so one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from this is that it's not about the camera, it's about the person behind the camera. And so, when you're starting out, oftentimes you don't have a big budget. And even for us, even though it was a Time magazine project, we did not have a big budget. And I wouldn't recommend making a series like this with only 2 people, with one person interviewing and the other person running 2 cameras, monitoring audio with the lights. It was definitely stressful at times, but we found ways to be creative. And I hope by sharing some of the behind the scenes details of how we pulled this together, that we can really just encourage people that, it gets tough, but just remember it's about the person behind the camera. So don't worry if you don't have the best equipment or anything like that. Just focus on your skills and keep working at it.
Wow. Well, I'm even more impressed that you did this with iPhones. And I think,
well, just the photos, not the videos.
Okay. Well, even still, it's great for our audience to know, like you said, you don't need a lot of resources.
One other thing I'll add, there's time. And one of my favorite pieces of advice is also from Ira Glass, who's the host of This American Life. He said that for a lot of creatives, early on in your career, it's normal to get frustrated because the work that you are producing is not up to your standards and it's not up to your taste. And for many people, that's the point where they give up, because it is so heartbreaking to have a vision in mind and not be able to carry that out. But you just have to know that you have to keep working on it. It just takes practice. You have to keep going at it. And one day you will realize that your abilities have caught up to your taste and your expectations. And that's when you're going to be able to make really great things. But that doesn't happen in the beginning. So don't be discouraged.
That is hugely helpful. Thank you for that. Let's also take another question. We have, young journalist students who came up with some questions as well for you. So Marta Fragoso from university, we call it UCAB University, UCAB, or the initials, in Caracas, asks, given that you're working in a media where usually men exercise the control, does that have an influence in the way that you narrate the documentary? If so, how would you qualify this Nancy Pelosi documentary as the way it is narrated?
So I would say when we were working on this, it was very important for us to have a majority female crew. And it was something that most of the women commented on when they walked into the room. And granted, we filmed this a couple years ago, as early as 2016, though we kept filming throughout the years. And I think hopefully that's changed now and it's less of a surprise. But it's definitely says something, when people see me behind the camera and they're pleasantly surprised that I'm a woman. In terms of how we directed this series, I felt like it made sense that we were women making these films for women and for men, but we wanted to reflect women's experiences and for us to be able to pull out what really spoke to us, especially as young women, in terms of the questions that we had, the things that we wanted to hear about. That was really the guiding force behind the direction of this project.
Well, that's great. Thank you for that. We have actually a comment and a question from Sevam Education USA Center. They say, or they would like us to know that they have a viewing party there at the center with young people. And they would like to know, which of the videos would you recommend we share with our young women viewers from Latin America and specifically Venezuela?
Yeah. I will, I have to take a look back at our list because it's quite a long list of women. But I think I would say, I wouldn't recommend just the Latina women, because there is just such an incredible, diverse group of women. And from each one of them, we wanted people to, to see themselves reflected. But I think you might be surprised just how many of the women you will feel connected to, even if they're much older or much younger. I really think, I really think there is a lot to learn from each of them. I guess one thing I will say is it is interesting to compare our interviews with some of the older women versus some of the younger women, because people like Nancy Pelosi, people like Oprah, they achieved their firsts a while back, and they've had some time to kind of sit and think about their legacy and think about their advice. Whereas some of the younger women, like when I think about Monet Davis or the football coach, we kind of interviewed them in a moment right as they were achieving their first. And so that was really cool to watch them work through processing what it meant for them to be accomplishing the first, and to talk about hardships that they had just endured on their way to becoming the first. So that's what I would recommend.
That's an excellent point, because I think, we should never limit ourselves to looking at people that are just sort of like us, like who speak the same language or come from the same culture, because there's so many things that we can learn from people all over, and, different, ages, races, etc. But since we did choose this film, and for those of us working for the Venezuela Affairs Unit, I would just say that one of the reasons we chose to start with this one is, well, in part because it matches with the new administration we have right now, with the Democratic Party in control of both houses, and obviously Speaker Pelosi leading one of those. But also because it's a time in which, even in the United States, our democracy is being tested. And obviously, that is something that Venezuela is struggling with right now. So we hope that you'll see, that all democratic institutions, all democracies, they take work. And, is something that we need to always, or from time to time have to defend to keep it strong and healthy. Okay, we're running out of time, so let's just take this last question. So one person asked, Diane, could you talk to us a bit about the Time magazine? Well, asking about the audiovisual team. You mentioned a little bit about how you set this up, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about the team that you had, the audiovisual team. How many members did it have? You already mentioned how it's organized, but if you have any more details on that.
Yeah, we have a team of about, I think I want to say 20 now on our video team. And we do everything from breaking news videos to short documentaries to feature documentaries. So it's really a great time to be in this field. When I first started at Time in 2013, there were only 3 people on the team. So I've really been able to see it grow, and it's really exciting to see the direction that it's taken.
Okay. You did also want to mention, some people were asking about you were thinking back on the list of films that you've worked on, that the project does comprise 40 short documentaries of female leaders. And one person actually wanted to know a little bit more, though, about what impressed you the most specifically about Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. So something you already touched on was the fact that she entered politics later in life. That was something that I saw with quite a few of the women. And that was such a relief to me, because I think in this day and age, there's a lot of pressure on young people to accomplish a lot at a very young age. With lists like 30 under 30, there's really this I think, a great deal of pressure on young people. And so it was wonderful to meet women who said that they didn't have a plan. They lived very different parts of their life, but they followed what they were passionate about, and they were diligent about it. And then ultimately they became the first. So I loved that Nancy Pelosi said to not let anyone trivialize how you've spent your years, because all of your experiences have contributed to your unique perspective and what you can offer. Another thing about Nancy Pelosi that I think is really impressive is that she really, she faces a lot of criticism, a lot of just being challenged as a woman in power, a strong woman in power. And one thing you should know about her is that she does not care what anyone thinks. And she wants to be the example for women of what it looks like to be a confident, unapologetic woman. And I think that is a really powerful statement.
It is. Thanks for sharing that. One last question before we wrap up. I know we're running short on time. Sevam Education Relay Center, they would like to know, given the generation gap between you and Nancy Pelosi and Madeleine Albright, which is another one of the women you profiled, how do you prepare for this type of project?
So we read everything that's out there. The best way to prepare is to do a lot of research. But we still try to remember the questions that we personally have in mind for them. So it's this fun back and forth between, okay, going into this, what do I personally want to know? And then you do as much research as you can and think about what they haven't talked about or significant moments in their life. And something we really like to do is start with a little bit about their childhood, how they were raised, how that informed some of their values and goals growing up, instances where they faced hardship. What was it like to work in an all-male environment and be the first? There were a lot of similarities in the questions that we asked these women, but they each had such unique responses.
It's amazing how that keeps coming up even still today, right? What is it like to work that male, dominant industry or field, whatever it is? But hopefully we'll stop asking that question someday. Okay, so we're pretty much at the end of our session. So, would like to invite our audience to come back in 2 weeks at the same time, day of the week, for our next episode of Time for Series. And in the next one, we will be profiling Aretha Franklin in honor of Black History Month. So thank you, Diane. Thank you so much again for accepting our invitation. It was such a pleasure having you to meet with our Venezuelan audience. Do you have any final thoughts?
Thanks so much for having me. And I'm so excited to see everyone tune in. So thank you.
Thank you. And to the whole Se Vea Las Mercedes team, thank you so much for hosting this edition. You've been wonderful. And thank you as well to our NGOs and journalists, our Binational Center students, and everyone else who joined us today. We really hope to see you back in our Time for Series in 2 weeks. Have a great rest of the afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.